Hi, everybody. Welcome to Global Tech Tales, What Buyers Want. I'm Keith Shaw, here to moderate a discussion with other editors from around the world about the hottest technology topics. Joining me for today's show, Matt Egan. He is the Global Content and Editorial Director at Foundry. And Jens Dose, he is the Editor-in-Chief of CIO in Germany. And Esther Macias, Editor-in-Chief in Spain. Hello. Welcome all.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
All right. And I apologize for any name pronunciation. This is a global show. I have to start learning all of my different languages. Matt, just to refresh everybody in case they missed the first episode, which we covered artificial intelligence. Today's topic is going to be what I call clouds at the crossroads. So just to remind everybody why we're doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Really appreciate that opportunity. So here's the thing about all of these wonderful people you see on this screen today is that we spend our days talking to IT buyers worldwide. In all of the world's major markets, journalists from our brands are talking to IT leaders and IT operational professionals about their real world lived experience, what it's actually like to be doing this job day to day. And that gives us a unique set of insights into what really matters to real IT leaders and IT professionals. And that, Keith, is what we're here to share today. It's what IT buyers want. It's real talk.
All right, and what we usually do on the show is we start off with a couple of statistics. These are gathered from our partners at IDC, and so for the cloud computing space, there were a couple of things that I want to bring up. First of all, worldwide spending on public cloud services is forecast to reach $805 billion and is going to expected to double in size by 2028. Now, spending growth may slow slightly between 24 and 28, but I think the compound annual growth rate is expected to be about 19.4%. The second big stat is that AI-related spending is fueling shared cloud infrastructure spending. So spending on compute and storage infrastructure products for cloud deployments, including dedicated and shared IT environments, increased 37% year over year in the first quarter of this year. They're now at $33 billion. But in addition, spending on edge computing is forecast to reach $378 billion in 2028, driven by demand for real-time analytics, automation, and enhanced customer experiences. So we've got a lot of spending on cloud, but then also spending on edge. And there's some indication that there might be, like we said, where cloud is at the crossroads. So I wanted to bring in the panel to see if they're also seeing these trends in their markets, or if they're also seeing this confusion about where cloud spending is going. Because again, cloud has been around for 10 to 15 years at least.
Sure. So I guess the question would be, from this original concept, this original promise of cloud that's going to bring ultimate efficiency and scalability to all of your infrastructure needs. And then the question is, if we're thinking about all of that spend that you spoke about, where are IT leaders in their cloud journey? And is it about expanding? Is it shrinking? Is it public? Is it private? Is it hybrid? And Keith, I'm going to say the thing you hate when I say, which is it is all of the above, right?
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, that's okay. That's all right.
When you talk to people in this space, well-run organizations have an IT strategy that ladders up to a long-term business strategy. They've got infrastructure that supports this strategy and growth. They've got the perfect blend of on-prem, public, private cloud, edge. But organizations also all have legacy, and they also all have different levels of security and governance and risk. And we should definitely hear from Esther and Jens on these subjects because they work within the EU, and there's a whole different set of concerns there. And IT leaders and IT professionals also work with and for business leaders who change their minds and have different strategies and different demands from week to week, from month to month, from quarter to quarter. We reported recently on CIO about the increase in tech debt, which is really impacting IT departments because business leaders are being more short-term, or some business leaders are being more short-term. So I think thinking about cloud, I think most IT buyers have a really clear idea of what great looks like, and they're doing everything they can to head towards it. But often when you speak to people who are, really experiencing these things, they feel like they're building the plane whilst they're flying the plane because they've got to deal with events and economics at the same time as they've got to deal with their perfect cloud strategy. But I'd love to hear from Jens and Esther on this.
Okay, well, if we are talking about big companies, because at least in Spain the situation is still different in SMB market and also in the government, of course, I would say that cloud is expanding, no, in terms of spend. The cloud has been a part of large Spanish companies for some time now. According to IDC data from 2023, half of companies in Spain are opting for the hybrid model. Okay, although the use of the public cloud is also growing, especially because there are a lot of, all the hyperscalers companies have established local regions, cloud regions here in Spain in the last 2 years. So this is boosting the public cloud here in Spain, definitely. Also, of course, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, but also other providers like Oracle, IBM have initiatives also related to sovereign data. Okay, I think according to IDC again, last year in Spain, the public cloud moved almost 5 billion euros, and this year is going to reach almost 6 billion. So it's a growth of more than 20%, no, year per year. What the CIOs of large companies are telling us is that the public cloud model is absolutely necessary for innovation. And this is because of the flexibility it provides when it comes to launching new business applications, many of which are also related to artificial intelligence, of course, Gen AI. But on the other hand, this year we're also seeing in some cases a repatriation of loads to on-premise or private cloud environments because CIOs are certain also improvements in cost, efficiency, and control. And regarding this, although some few years ago, many experts said that the public cloud was going to dominate this market, the real thing is that today the cloud environments are very heterogeneous and allow many modalities, no? And all the CIOs we talk to are betting for models that combine different types of clouds depending on their needs. And normally they are also working with several providers to avoid locking problems because they are very concerned about this topic. And another trend we see is that CIOs are more concerned for adopting more sustainable and secure environments, no, in the cloud. For the moment.
Okay. I want to have Jens jump in here too to see, because I think we both brought up not only whether the spending is increasing, decreasing, or expanding, but also that whole issue of public versus hybrid versus private. I think a lot of companies in the U.S. are still struggling with that, or not, maybe not struggling, but at least trying to figure out which parts of their business want to be on which parts of the cloud. Jens, are you seeing that in your areas too in Germany?
Yeah, so we see all of the above, so to speak. But us Germans love the regulations. We have lots of them. So we have like regulations from the state side. We have the critical infrastructure. We have lots of industry and R&D in German enterprises and the medium-sized companies. So their IP is their business. So they are kind of hesitant to put it all in the public cloud, especially the hyperscalers. So we see mostly hybrid or multi-cloud structures in the German market. So as Esther said, for innovation, they want to profit from the ecosystems of the hyperscalers, so that they don't have to develop each feature and each new tool themselves, but can bank on what the hyperscalers build and just tailor it to their business. But like operational technology, or as I said, IP, sensitive personal information from like healthcare providers or something, they are mostly in private clouds or on premises in the data centers, mostly because of regulations and concerns about data privacy.
Do you see companies making that decision ahead of time, or do you think that some of them are they move things and then they realize, okay, wait, I should have done that as a hybrid, or I should have done that as a private on-premises thing, or are they making these decisions before they move something to the cloud?
Most do it beforehand because you have to have the governance in place to actually start, not to violate any regulations and risk fines or even worse. So most CIOs we speak to do have a plan, have a strategy, and execute according to that plan and strategy because they have to.
I think governance and risk are becoming hotter topics as well, though. I think it's becoming more kind of crystallized in that sense. And I think what you were maybe driving at, Keith, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like one of the promises of cloud that the reality hasn't quite matched up to is exactly that. Different data deserves to be in different places. And I think that's something that has, in some occasions, been uncovered retrospectively, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it is because of the governance and the regulations, rather than maybe any data leakage that got out, because it still feels that cloud is relatively secure compared to previous processes. Correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, again, every organization has legacy, and the legacy of most organizations includes times that if we looked back now, that server that was under your desk was an unconscionable risk, kind of thing. So I don't think you can look at these things in isolation. And I do think that most modern public cloud installations are sufficiently secure for most data. But I also understand that you have to govern for the exception.
Right. I just remember that in the early days of the cloud promise and the cloud hype, they kept saying, "Oh, we're going to be more secure than what you've currently got in your on premises," and that was a reason that many companies were reluctant at first to go to the cloud. But then I think that they did do their homework and their due diligence to find. To make sure that these cloud environments were secure. And then I think the cost savings took over for a lot of these companies. So I don't know how much we really are talking about cloud security these days. I'm sure it's out there.
Another issue that I just want to bring up at this point is, aside from the security, is like the availability or the network connection. Because in Germany, we have many rural parts where there's just not infrastructure to support high latency cloud service. Like I talked to a CIO of like a food provider, and they have 2 data centers, all flash storage, because their VDI infrastructure just cannot live on cloud alone, because they don't know if they have the latency or not to provide the user experience they want for their users.
And so what did they end up doing, Jens?
They put in each of their dependencies like one data center that's providing for this place, and just don't rely on cloud for any high latency services like data access and so on.
That's another thing I want to bring up, and I want to ask Esther this too, is we are seeing some cases where companies may have moved a lot of their applications and their services to the cloud, and then all of a sudden at the end of the month they get a bill, and it's almost like that first time you get your kids' cell phone bills, and you're like, whoa, this is, it's almost like sticker shock. So we are seeing cloud costs go up, so much so that we're now seeing companies that are coming up with applications and services to help CIOs monitor their cloud spend. Should that be concerning with the price of cloud services going up, or is that just a minor blip? What do the IT leaders tell you, Esther?
Well, of course, all the leaders are worried about the cost, because many of them have seen how the costs are increasing with the clouds. No, that the promise they had with the cloud of going down the cost is not real. But now I think they have learned the lessons, and they manage in a more efficient way the costs, thanks to best practices like FinOps, and they are prepared, I think, to manage this, to have the control, because that's another problem, the loss of the control, of their cloud environments, I think.
That's a really important point, Esther. I was thinking about this point earlier, and again, if we go back, the promise of cloud was ultimate scalability and efficiency. And that promise is partially fulfilled, I think. It is possible. And to your point, Esther, I feel like, a lot of smart IT leaders are doing that now, even given legacy, governance, tech debt, and working with an imperfect model, which most organizations do. But something I've heard a lot about recently is this idea of short-term versus long-term. So when we talk about cost and spend, Keith, you said at the end of the month, which is definitely a factor. But when we talk about spend, are we talking about this quarter, this year, the next 10 years? Because it is most efficient today to invest with one partner, one ecosystem, put it all in the public cloud, but then immediately you lose flexibility. And once you're in, it might get a lot more pricey over the long term. So I do feel one of the challenges for IT leaders is that they have to balance their IT strategy with a business leader who might be thinking more short term. They might need savings quick. So you end up with this kind of big picture approach, this strategic approach to providing the organization with what it needs to innovate and to build with efficiency. But then you've got the tactics, which is managing end user costs with ruthless efficiency in the short term. And I do find a lot of IT buyers will tell you that's a conundrum they're having to deal with the whole time.
I talked to an IT leader the other day who had kind of a clever solution, because in the course of the democratization of IT resources in the company, they shifted the ownership of cost per business unit to the business unit leaders. So they share the use, but each business unit is responsible at the end of the day for the cost for the money they spend for cloud resources they need. So that is, in my opinion, like a way out to level this conundrum. Like everyone's in the same boat, has the same resources, but is responsible for his ballpark or her ballpark.
Yeah, because that is one of the problems with something you can't see or touch, is business leaders, if it's an IT bill, they will typically not think of it as their cost. So that does feel like a really smart solution, Jens.
And in the back of the mind of the business leaders is, oh, that's my money now. I don't want to spend my money.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, right.
Everyone's really good at spending other people's monies. When it's your own, there's all of a sudden you get really frugal.
I say this all the time. Believe me, there is some relevance here. To the under-8 soccer team that I coach, I tell them every football, imagine it's a £10 note. So when you kick it down the hill and we don't get it back, that's £10 that's gone out of your piggyback, okay? And I think what Jens is advocating here is a similar approach to cloud storage.
The question that I would have for that IT leader, he was willing to give up his part of the budget to shift it over to the business leader, or is it handled differently?
It's handled, if I can remember correctly, in a steering board. So they allocate the whole budget, and then it is given to the business unit leaders and the IT leader, and so it's one budget but distributed in an additional step equally to the demand that's there.
I think this is this is showing the democratization of technology and how other leaders, business leaders, are taking the lead. In technology, and the role of CIOs is also changing because of this.
And
right.
That's a kind of a development we see with Gen AI, with low code, no code, with shadow IT for years now. So that's a process that's all already in motion. Yeah. And now it's time for the leaders to kind of own up to it and say, okay, this is happening. How do we deal?
Yeah, we've seen the trend with software as a service and those SaaS-based apps where business unit leaders will just spend all sorts of money on SaaS apps, and then the IT people are like, "Whoa, we've got a problem here." And then you have hundreds, if not thousands, of apps that are being paid for, and IT has to kind of get a control of that. So I want to say app spending versus cloud spending. So we might also be seeing this in the cloud space where business unit leaders are taking control of cloud spend, but are they doing it still fiscally, responsibly?
One of the perceived benefits of cloud and one of the geniuses of the marketing of cloud is it does make simple something that is very complex. So, and I know we will end up talking about AI at some point, but as with AI,
we're getting there, Matt.
but as with AI, you have an approach to technology that is understandable by anybody, and so you have the internal question of why aren't we in the cloud for everything? Because that's going to be cheaper and it's going to scale more quickly. We're going to have the most latest technology the whole time. But you also have, this was one of the initial successes of AWS, was that a developer could use their own credit card and sign up and be online pretty quickly, kind of thing. And that happened within big enterprises, even if they didn't know they were on cloud. And I'm not saying that happens today, but to Jens's point about shadow IT and the democratization of IT, like you have to have a very good answer as an IT leader as to why we're not using these things, because line of business leaders understand conceptually what the opportunity and the benefit is.
Now, Matt, you mentioned complexity and simplicity, but as more and more companies are moving things to the cloud, it does become a little bit more complex, which also requires then the enterprise that is monitoring their cloud services to then invest in training and employees and making sure that they have the right skills. Are you also seeing those costs go up as well?
I think if not monitored and managed in the way you're talking about, all costs will go up. Again, I come back to this point of the best strategy for cloud is probably not a cloud strategy. It's an overall infrastructure, storage, and connectivity strategy. Mentioning AI, well, we're going to see a rise in edge computing because it makes sense. Almost like Jens's example of the rural organization, it makes sense to have your compute and your storage close to where it's being used if you're doing something that's really high intensity from a compute perspective. But if you can store it in the public cloud, it's probably more efficient to do so. So I think I come back to this point I made earlier, which is, on the one hand, from a cost perspective, there's the strategy. How long we're going to measure cost over, how are we going to optimize for that time period? And that will involve working with a limited number of partners, and how much do we want to be committed to those partners? Because that does limit our ability to change and reduce costs in future, versus like in the short term, how do we keep those costs down? How do we rely on hardware and technology that we don't need to replace in the short term? So I think, right from a dedicated focus on cost management and reduction, which is definitely, Esther mentioned this earlier and she should speak to this, those kind of FinOps type operations, right up to that kind of at a strategic level, like how are we organizing our costs and what is the time period over which we're going to measure and optimize those costs, which was what Jens was speaking about earlier. I think all of the above, really.
And the cost angle doesn't end with the resources, right? Because if you have just one vendor, that might be viable. But as soon as you have two or three to prevent vendor lock-in, or to have data, or to have the freedom to move data from one provider to the other when things get dire, you have more management efforts that have to be paid in form of more personnel, or upskilling or reskilling or something else. So the total cost of ownership depends on how you use the cloud, not just which cloud you are using.
Yeah, Esther, did you want to bring up some additional costs that people might be seeing?
There's a lack of experts, of course, and companies are struggling with this. Fortunately, the big providers also help, with some resources, but it's true that they have this problem,
I wanted to bring up an analogy that I thought of while, Matt was talking about his U8 soccer team, football team. And I was thinking that in the consumer space with streaming media and for all of the entertainment, so the Netflix, the Amazon Prime, all of this, remember that the initial reason for streaming was we're gonna let you cut your cable bill. Mm-hmm. And so everybody, then said, okay, well, I'll do streaming, and streaming is going to be so less expensive. So now think about this, like, okay, I'm going to move everything into the cloud, but now we've got 17 different services out there, and all of a sudden my streaming bill is almost, if not more than what my cable bill was. And so, when Jens was talking about, multi-cloud environments now, so it's not just you don't have all of your apps in just one provider. You might be going to Microsoft, Google, AWS, and now you've tripled your costs there, but not necessarily like stacking on top of each other. But now you've got 3 different platforms, and a lot of those data platforms probably don't synchronize correctly, or if you're getting analytics and reports, they don't always use the same standard of reporting. So now you've added additional costs there. And I'm wondering if we're seeing that with the cloud. Has it been, have we been seeing that for a while? And what do companies do if they are seeing that?
I mean, from an industry perspective, the big win for the vendors is to be that single supplier. And we're seeing, the ecosystem approach, whereby hardware vendors, software vendors are combining their approach and their wares to essentially sell their products through a single point, where the vendor CTO is almost becoming part of the team in some organizations. And there's a lot to be said for that, because the promise can be, we will always give you the latest technology. We will guarantee pricing for a certain length of time that scales with you. So you can say to your business colleagues as an IT leader, you will always have the best technology. We'll be able to innovate, and we know what our costs are going to be for the next, 2, 5, 10 years. But Jens mentioned it earlier, that does put you in the position of vendor locking, which a lot of organizations are also against and fearing. But I think from an industry perspective, it's going to be really interesting. And your friend of mine, AI, is driving this somewhat as well, which is that organizations, I think, are getting a bit more comfortable with the idea of working with a small group of vendor partners who might form their own ecosystem, because they need the simplicity and they need the ability to scale quickly more than they fear the idea of being locked into a single vendor or a single set of vendors. But I'd love to hear from Esther and Jens on that.
Yeah, Jens, do you hear from a lot of IT people saying vendor lock-in is okay, or are they wary of vendor lock-in in the cloud space?
That depends. Sadly.
All right, that's okay.
So it depends on the industry. So in high sensitive regions like the public sector, healthcare, energy providers, they do have those concerns, and they really have to cater their strategy to meet the regulations and the demands of their customer base, right? If you go into a sector that's not that much regulated, it's mostly like, okay, I do have like my Microsoft or AWS, and I stick with them because their ecosystem matches my needs. Like each provider has a different ballpark they are good at or not good at. So there, when the risk gets lower, the companies might rather just stick with one provider. Because they can rely on, like, to what Matt said, have just one, but that one can cater to my needs in the way I want.
And Esther, what about vendor lock-in? Same kind of concerns?
Yeah, I would say that yes, in Spain, the most of the CIOs are worried about vendor locking, and they try to work with several cloud providers, but that, of course, complicates their lives. So they have the problem of how to manage all these different environments, and this is it's complicated and it's costly for them. So, but I think that yes, they want to have different options for not being so, to put all the eggs in the same basket, you say.
Right. All right. So we're at about 30 minutes now, and I have not yet brought up the topic of generative AI and AI. So I think we'll probably talk the rest of the show about this. So my first question is because of the hype around generative AI and AI applications and things like that, do the IT leaders that you speak with think that the spotlight is shifted so that there's less of a spotlight on cloud? Or is it more just like, oh, here comes the next technology and we've got to be ready for that while still doing all of our other things? And then we could talk about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I think Gen AI is a point of inflection, at least here in Spain. Is like all the CIOs are seeing that everybody is investigating in the technology, doing pilots, and they want to do this, and they need the cloud. They need the cloud because the cloud gives you the capacity, the computing power, and it's important for them to innovate. No, they don't need to make a huge investment. No, initial investment in the Gen AI projects, and they try that in the cloud environment.
Same in Germany. So every IT leader has some kind of pilot or POC regarding Gen AI in the making. But I don't think the discussion on cloud and how to manage cloud correctly will go away, because it has become a foundation for IT and per that for Gen AI. So, and especially in Germany, there is the discussion of which cloud to use for which use case. Can I just put my Gen AI model or my LLM into the public cloud, or do I need a private cloud because my data is so sensitive? What cost and what effort does this require for me as a company to put in? So that it will not die.
It's almost like the same discussions that they had about cloud are now happening with AI. Like, which vendor do I use? Where do I put it? Right.
They are, but to the point that both Esther and Jens made, like what I hear a lot of is, yes, AI is a unique opportunity and a unique problem to solve. But that means that as an IT leader, as an IT buyer, we need to support ambitious business strategies with infrastructure. And it's got to be infrastructure that we can afford. It's got to be infrastructure that we can afford financially and the world can afford from a sustainability perspective. So I would say that AI is, to a large extent, if it is an infrastructure problem, it's a cloud problem. So I think it's having a massive impact on the conversation around cloud. Because again, you have, challenges around legacy infrastructure, cleanliness of data, lack of understanding on the compute power that's required. There's an expectation that AI will drive efficiency, but often that comes from business leaders who aren't thinking about the infrastructure that's got to underpin the AI. So I see and I hear a lot about a couple of outcomes that we can expect. One is, we talked about it before, Jens spoke about it, this idea of vendor ecosystems winning because they support a mix of cloud and on-prem, new and legacy, but they can promise always the latest hardware and software, both in terms of infrastructure, but also software features. But I do also think from a cloud perspective that we will see edge really grow over the next year. Because if you think about those needs, the need for compute, the need for processing and data local to where the activity is happening, in a way that can be scaled, it can be plugged in and it can be plugged out. That is an edge computing solution. But I would think of it as part of an overall infrastructure problem, of which cloud is a big part of the solution.
Right.
And I think it will be interesting to see which players play in this edge field, because now we see like NVIDIA getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they have the AI chips all the cloud providers need to put into their data centers to support all the compute power they get from their customers. So maybe they have an in on the edge as well in the coming months and years, and provide services for like autonomous driving, or in the healthcare sector, or you name it, right? Where you need quick and correct decisions on the place they happen.
So what do the IT buyers that you talk with, what do they want from their vendors? Do they want this partnership? Do they want to just basically just buy and sell it and then we'll take care of everything else? Or is it more of they want that integrated partnership between hardware, software, network, storage, and then obviously the services on top of that? That's kind of an easy question, but I want to see if I got it right.
So from my perspective, they want the one-stop shop who has everything.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And are there enough vendors out there to do that, or do they have to go pick and choose?
The vendors are forming partnerships and ecosystems to supply this. So there, obviously, we can never, and interested to hear from Esther and Jens, but we can never say that this is a uniform thing and a uniform approach, but I definitely feel that you work with an individual partner who actually is representing an ecosystem of suppliers. Jens mentioned NVIDIA, classic example. NVIDIA technology is inside boxes made by other hardware vendors, currently being sold by cloud vendors, like through their software solutions kind of thing. And I think that, like I say, the idea of the vendor CTO becoming a part of the team, obviously there's massive benefits to that from the vendor perspective. But actually, I'm hearing increasingly from an IT leader perspective that ability to have one partner who can help you solve all your problems is really necessary in a world in which AI is changing so much.
Yeah, Esther, any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think we are seeing a competition scenario, no, with, in the tech companies, no, from that point of view, everybody is partnering with everybody because they want to make the things easier for their clients. But of course, they continue competing in some areas, but they have to join to facilitate the life of their clients.
So does this also mean that we're stuck with consultants that can bring all of those vendor partners together? I don't know. I always have a weird feeling about consultants.
The sense I'm getting more is that the vendors have woken up to that. And of course, they're always going to work with consultants and resellers, but they're increasingly trying to create packages and solutions that mean they can work directly with the companies they work with.
They want to cut out the middleman, like every salesperson.
Yeah.
So to speak.
That's a good point too. All right. So we want to wrap up the show with a vote where everybody gets to kind of vote on something that's going to happen next year. So for this topic with cloud computing, I want to ask, in 2025, will most companies increase, decrease, or stay the same? Or will they shift their spending in the cloud, maybe take some of that spending and go to edge computing, for example? So I went first last time, so I'll go last, I guess, this time. So Esther, where do you think most companies are going to do with their cloud spend in 2025?
Well, I think it will increase. I think it has to increase because companies have to go on, their journey to digital transformation, and it's necessary, completely necessary for their needs. So I think it will increase. The IDC and all analyst companies are saying the same, I think, for next year.
So for Germany, is the same. It will increase. Our special thing will be that we would, or companies will invest in sovereign clouds. To cater to the whole regulatory issues I mentioned earlier. But I'm with Esther. It will definitely increase.
And Matt?
I completely disagree. No, I don't. Clearly it's going to increase. I think increase and shift, though, if I think about the way you phrased the question, Keith, because I do think the data sovereignty piece is really important, but also edge, hybrid, like the AI trend alone is going to mean that not only is it about increasing spend, it's about finding solutions that are scalable and sustainable for organizations. So increase and shift would be my answer. All
right, just to be different, I'm going to say a different answer, but I agree with all of you about the increase. But for my official vote, I'm going to say stay the same, because I think they might put a pause on spending, because I'm also on the record from my AI show that we think that the bubble may decrease a little bit. So I think as companies may pause their spending and just kind of reevaluate where everything is going in 2025. But that's just because I'm just doing this for this show. My true heart is probably that they will increase. And if that's a wishy-washy answer, too bad, because I'm the host of the show. So. All right. Hey, thanks everybody for participating in this Global Tech Tales, What Buyers Want episode. It's, great discussions. I love hearing what's going on out in the rest of the world. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to be back next month with additional editors, and we're going to talk about IT careers and how companies can build a fantastic technology team. That's all the time we have for the show today. Be sure to add any comments you have below. Check out our other Tech Talk shows, such as Today in Tech, CIO Leadership Live, and Demo if you're interested in seeing B2B product demonstrations. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.